Hey guys, Mr. Farrell here. I wanted to give you guys something to kind of watch to kind of help with this reading that you guys should have done now. So, like I said, if we're on week 4, one of the things I asked you guys to do was to go through here and read this article, this PDF. That's this guy right here. And as you're reading, you had some definitions to find. So what we did is we broke up the definitions into 2 parts. That way we weren't going to overwhelm you. So last week's was a little more challenging, probably some words that were new to you. This week, there are a couple words that are probably new to you, but there are a lot of words that you guys probably already know. And so these are words that you probably learned in middle school, if not elementary school. And we're just making sure that we're on the same page. That way, when we go into our next topic, energy pyramids, food webs, food chains, we're on the same page and we all know what that means. So these words here that are highlighted, I've highlighted them for a reason. So the reason I've highlighted them is because those are words that you didn't find in your reading. So you found all these other ones in your reading, and we'll talk about those here in a second, but you did not find scavenger, decomposer, predator, prey. So you probably already know some of these. You probably know that a predator is going to be an animal that hunts, and I'm going to underline hunt because this is a big idea. That's kind of this is the hunter. Another animal, actually we're going to say organism or food. So that's what's going to be a predator. Now I said organism because this is anything living. So it could be an animal, it could be something different. And we'll get to that here in a second after we get prey. So prey, you guys probably already know this, but prey is going to be an organism. Let's turn off our highlight here. An organism that is, and we're going to underline this word here, hunted. So we got the hunter and then we got the hunted. I'm going to say by an animal or food. So you guys probably already knew this. We're just, like I said, we're just making sure that we're on the same page. So predators and prey, a lot of times we think of things such as a lion, which would be the predator, chasing and killing a zebra, the prey. So that's usually really common. So something chasing, the food. So in whatever it could be a fox chasing a rabbit, anything. That's usually what we think about. But also too, we're really talking about who's eating and who's being eaten. So things like that could even be like a cow eating grass. We could characterize that by predator-prey relationships. So it's not very common that we think of that. Usually we're thinking about that case of the lion eating the zebra, but we can even talk about cows eating grass or deers eating grass or something eating a plant. Now, scavenger. This is going to be an animal that feeds on the remains of a dead organism. Okay, and I'm going to put an example here. So I'm going to put in parentheses, example. An example of these are things like vultures. If I can type. Hyenas. Hyenas are the animals in the Lion King. So if you have like Mufasa and Simba, the good guys, and Scar's the bad guy, and the little animals that are running around with Scar, those are the hyenas. So if you didn't know what hyenas were. And then we got buzzards. So those are examples here. And scavengers are going to take advantage of whatever they can find. So if there is like a dead possum on the side of the road, that vulture is going to eat it. They're not picky. So decomposer is similar. So this is a consumer, so they eat. It feeds on dead materials. And we're going to underline this next word because this is important. Returns, if I can spell, it returns the nutrients back into the soil. This is K there. And apparently Google Docs is realizing I can't spell. Okay, so some examples of this might be bacteria and fungi. So those are some examples of decomposers. Now, decomposers, they're going to return nutrients back into the soil. We underline this word return here because they're like recyclers. So they're going to take whatever they feed on and they're going to get some energy from it. But a lot of that, the stuff that makes up that dead thing is going to return back into the soil. So example of this is if we see something that has got hit by a car, maybe like a possum or something. It got hit by a car. It's on the side of the road. Well, it may be there for a couple of days, but it's not going to be there for 2 weeks. What happens to it? Well, it decomposes. Well, what happens to it? Well, these decomposers, these bacteria and these fungi here, they're going to break it down and they're going to receive energy from it when they break it down and they're going to get some food from it. But when they break it down in a way to where the things that were in the possum's body, they're going to return back to the soil and that's going to be recycled. So things like plants and animals, they're going to use those things to when they eat. Now, next thing we got is we're going to talk about these two things up here. So autotroph and producer, heterotroph and consumer. So sometimes you might see the word autotroph, sometimes you might see the word producer, sometimes you might see heterotroph, sometimes you might see consumer. It really depends what we're talking about here. So first thing is we're going to talk about word parts. So one of the word parts we got is hetero. And then another part here we got is troph, T-R-O-P-H. We're going to start with troph first. Troph means nourishment. When we mean nourishment, we mean like getting nutrients. So like feeding, eating, feeding slash eating, we'll say. Okay. Now, we talked about word parts last week. We said that bio meant life, B-I-O meant life. So when we talked about biotic factors and the biosphere, when we see those three letters together, B-I-O, that means life. Now, troph means nourishment. Hetero, this one is going to be one that's very useful for you guys to learn. If you guys learn this is going to help you when you go on to biology next year because you're going to see this word part hetero 3 or 4 times at least. Hetero means different. So what this is, we're going to put this underneath here. So heterotrophs or consumers get energy by eating. And an example of this, you guys can think of one, us, and we can say just in general, animals. Animals eat. So these things that get like for example, animals, they get their energy by eating. And so how does this go into the word part? Well, if we think about that zebra and that lion that I mentioned earlier, the lion gets energy from eating. So the lion gets its energy from a different source. It doesn't get its energy from itself. It has to get its energy from the zebra. So it gets it from a different place. So that's kind of why we name it that way. And then the next thing we have is autotroph. So we got word part auto, we got troph. So we said troph meant nourishment. So like feeding or eating. And a lot of times we think auto means car because auto is short for automobile, but auto does not mean car. We just shorten that word automobile to auto. Um, One thing that's useful is thinking of other words that have that word part in it. If you don't know what auto means, you might think of some other words that have that word auto in it. So we could think of things like automatic, like an automatic car wash, or we could think of things like autocorrect because everybody loves that. We could also think about autoplay, so YouTube autoplays, or even we'll throw one that has another word part that you know, autobiography. So maybe you have an idea. So take a second, take a guess. What do you think it means? Auto means self. So when we're talking about that automatic car wash, that's a car wash that washes the car by itself. If we're talking about autocorrect, it changes that word by itself when you didn't want it to. If we're talking about the autoplay, YouTube will play the next video without you telling it to. And then the autobiography, well, auto means self, bio means life, graph means to write. So this is those when someone writes about themselves, they write their like life story. So easy way to really just break this down. They make autotrophs or producers make their own energy or make their own food. Let's say food. And we know you get energy by eating food. So an example of this would be plants. So if you think about the plant, they use the sunlight to make their own food. So, and they use that food for energy. Plants do actually need food. It's just that they're able to make their food. They don't go chase something down and eat it. They make their food themselves. So they don't need to get energy from a different source. Now, we call it producer, and a way to help you think about producer is if you go to the grocery store, you might go to the produce section of the grocery store. Well, think about what's in that. You have things like strawberries, you have apples, grapes. You also find things like lettuce, peppers, cucumbers, mushrooms, cilantro, all that stuff. Well, what are all of those? Those are vegetables. What are vegetables? Vegetables are plants. So that's another way to hopefully help you remember what these things mean. So if it were me you're learning these words, heterotroph and autotroph, I would start with learning the word parts. Hetero means different. So that means they get their energy from a different source. Auto means self. All right. And so if we're looking at some of these other words are familiar. You guys are probably familiar with photosynthesis. You should be familiar with these too. A lot of times we think about these words when we carnivore, herbivore, omnivore, when we talk about middle school science. And I usually think of like Jurassic Park when I think about these, because I think about the carnivores being the dinosaurs that are like chasing the people, you know, when everything goes wrong, they're trying to eat them and the people are running away from them. Well, those are the meat eating dinosaurs. And the herbivores, those are the ones at the beginning of the movie when everything's happy and, you know, they walk up and pet the dinosaurs. Well, they're not a threat because those herbivores are plant eaters. They're not going to eat the people. And then we got omnivores, which is a combination of both. They eat plants and animals. So, hopefully you guys got these definitions. Hopefully they were correct. If not, I would suggest you to go back, change it, fix it, and we will see you next week.